All right, we're going to do contract to close today. We're moving from growing our business into running your business. You see the highlighted areas here: negotiate contracts, transaction management to closing, vendor management, compliance and risk management and such. So just getting to the contract doesn't mean that they will get to close a deal, right? We have to do everything we can to bulletproof this transaction for our client. We write an offer based on what we know and what we're told. And then as the information unfolds, as we do our due diligence, as maybe we're told things a little later on down the line, we get to renegotiate the elements of the contract, right? And in it, this contract affords in a unaltered state several areas of renegotiation, right? The first is inspections and due diligence. That means we go in and we can inspect physical, and we can also look at any information that comes through, any other disclosures from the seller that we might not have seen in the past. And there's also the appraisal and the loan. So it's finding out more about the property. It's measuring valuation. And then it's the buyer's ability to purchase. These are the three default contingencies that are built into this contract to protect your buyer and seller in the end, even though they might not like it as much, right? A lot of people do a lot of work to make the closing happen. As a realtor, you and your co-realtor are like conductors conducting the orchestra of all the people and tasks that happen between contract and closing. It's likely also to be a time of stress for your client and of course for the client on the other side of the equation. So your relationship and communication with the client is just as important as your relationship and communication with all of the parties that make the deal. In that, let me just say, do your best to communicate clearly and to establish an open relationship with all the players, right? If you're on the seller side or the buyer side, you want to have a relationship with the agent, your cooperating agent. That's what they call it, cooperating agent, all right? And then move on to the escrow officer, the loan officers, inspectors that come through. There's no need to have an adversarial relationship with any of them. There are a lot of people out there who believe that dissidence or friction between the parties creates some advantage for their client. It doesn't in the end. It ups the possibility of this not going through, of the deal not going through, based on that, that style of doing business. So I highly recommend that you focus on those relationships in a relational way, and really keep an open line of honest and authentic communication. All right. Let's see, build buyer. So what we're going to go over today in this 1 hour session is build buyer and seller timelines, best practices for managing the deal. We're going to talk about the command transaction management system a little bit, and then we'll recap the whole thing. After this session, you guys will develop an understanding of the steps necessary after a contract is signed. where a deal can fall apart and how to avoid that and how to use command to help you get the deal done and closed. The first timeline we're going to look at is the buyer timeline. This is a very, very loose timeline. Let's start. I'm going to go a little off the rails on this because I think there's some details in here that I'd like to address with you guys that don't get addressed in this kind of general approach to these timelines. And a lot of them will mean the same for buyer and seller. There's an overlap. The seller's timeline is much easier. Once the seller agrees to contractual price and terms, barring any failings contractually on the buyer side, they're pretty screwed into the deal. There's not a lot of outs for the seller once they agree, outside of buyers not living up to the terms of the contract. All right, so let's just start with that pretense. We're also going to start this conversation from an executed contract. So let's talk about what an executed contract looks like. That's a fully executed contract where all of the the RPA and all of the consecutive counter offers are fully executed, signed, and ready to go, right? The ratification date of the contract is the date that the last signature was put on there. If it's the seller's agreement to the terms or the buyer's agreement to the terms, whichever is the last. So, and what that means is if the seller counter offers the buyer and the buyer agrees, then they have a deal. That's the date that the contract is ratified. If the buyer writes an offer and or a consecutive offer, they're the last one to write the offer or the counter offer, and the seller agrees, that's the last. That's the ratification date, and that's important to know because what gets confusing about the escrow process is what is day one? Okay, so day one is the day after the ratification date. Okay, the last signature comes on a Tuesday. Day one is a Monday. Whether escrow is opened or not is not important. Contractually, the timelines for day one are the day after the last signature. Okay, does that make sense? It will come up again. You'll ask. Because everybody gets confused, but that's the clearest way I could say it. Do you guys get that? Any questions on that? Okay. All right, so that's day one. The contract affords for for default timelines, and for the sake of this conversation, we will go with those default timelines. 30-day escrow, we're going to go with, right, to close. That means that there's a 21-day contingency for loan, 17-day contingency for appraisal, and a 17-day contingency for inspections. All right. The seller has, I believe, 7 days contractually to give you all of their disclosures. That kind of gets squishy sometimes. Sometimes sellers representatives have that ready. Sometimes they don't. If you are representing a seller, I would say get their disclosures up front so that as soon as you get into contract, you can deliver those, and that's totally out of the way. And so what this means, this contract that we work off is an active removal of contingencies, which means that if you have a 17-day inspection contingency, it means that on day 17, you are saying as the buyer that you're going to remove your contingency for inspections. It doesn't automatically go away though. You have to remove it with a removal of contingency form. That removal of contingency forms in SIP forms, and it's saying, we have done our inspections, we have reviewed the information, and we're ready to move forward.
That goes for all three of the types, loan, appraisal, and inspections?
Absolutely.
Okay.
They all need to be removed in writing with this form of contingency removal form, which you find in SIP forms. Now, what a lot of people get confused about are extensions of time, right? You can't hold the process hostage as the buyer's representative. And meaning that, oh, we're just not going to remove our contingencies. We're just going to let it flow through. The seller has a vehicle for that. That vehicle is the notice to perform. It can be used by either party, but in this particular case, the sellers will use that to say, hey, you said you were going to remove it in this timeline. You have the default on the contract is 72 hours. You have 72 hours to do this activity, or the seller has the right to quit. Does that make sense? Now, another nuance piece. When can you serve the notice to perform? Well, since the notice to perform is a three-day window, if you serve it on the day that the contingency expires, they get 3 more days out of it. But the seller has the right to issue it up to 3 days prior to that close of contingency, or the expiration of contingency, I should say. And what that means is that if you serve it prior to the close, that on that day, if they do not remove that contingency, then the seller has the right to quit.
So you're saying that the seller can put this into effect 3 days prior to close, and they could set that so that it has to end when it said it ended. Okay.
Exactly.
But there's cases where it can be extended 3 days past that date. Okay.
Absolutely. And so flip to the buyer side. If you need more time, don't wait till the day of expiration.
Right.
Communicate. It feels bad when you get a call from the agent on the day that one of the contingencies is supposed to expire and say, oh, we're going to need more time. We don't have that. Right? It's kind of disingenuous in a way. So communicate. Right? Also, another nuance piece of that is the request for repair. We're gathering information, right? The request for repair is not tied to the contingency. Okay? A lot of people are like, oh, my inspectors can't get out there, or oh, the electrical contractor can't come out to give me a estimate until. Guess what? That's too bad. The request for repair is not tied to the contingency. It's not a way to extend the inspection contingency. There are 2 separate documents working on two separate planes. The seller does not have a obligation to respond, to agree, to consider, or to counter. They could just ignore the request for repair. You can't ignore the contingency of the inspection contingency timelines. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I know it's a little, there's layers in there, but any questions about that piece? Same with appraisal. Oh, the appraisal came, my lender was not able to get the appraiser out there in a timely manner. That's your responsibility contractually. If you're going to need more time, let them know a couple days before. a week before, lay the groundwork. Hey, it looks like the appraiser, we're having a hard time getting appraiser out there. The market's very busy, and my lender is having a hard time getting appraisal out there in the timely manner. We may need an extension.
And you
Right?
communicate this with the other agent or with,
Yes.
yes, okay,
Yeah, if you want to have a good relationship,
okay,
absolutely, Renee. Treat them like you would want to be treated. Okay.
okay, that's easy.
Yeah, I mean that's always the rule. And then we move on to so I mean, I could make it all about that moment, right? But we want to move on. So we are doing our inspections. We are getting appraisers out there and getting the appraisals back in a timely manner. And we are exploring and doing everything we can to get the loan that we said we were going to get in the RPA. That's what those first 21 days 17 and 21 days look like. We're doing our due diligence. Go ahead.
I in one of the other Ignites, Christina Kim, she suggested for us to come by and look at the new RPAs because they are being revamped, I guess, right?
Yes.
It's changing and it comes with a guide. She said we can come by the brokerage and pick that up.
Yeah, I have them printed out on the front desk for anybody who wants one.
Okay.
They're not going to go into effect until December. We're going to have classes on it, several classes on it. Lucky for you, newer agents, you don't know the old one.
Right.
So your learning curve is going to be easier than people who've been doing it the same way forever. The intention of the contract, nothing I'm telling you now has changed, right? The guidelines and all the intentions of the contract, not changed. The format is changing. So,
okay.
That's, again, it'll be easier for you guys than it will be for the existing agents. All right. So here we are. Let's talk about who else is involved in this conversation, because I think that's very, very important. You have escrow. Escrow is a neutral party to this process. All they do is execute on the terms of the contract. They can't alter any of the terms unilaterally. They can't do it for one person and not the other. They can't take any action in this process that is not laid out in that contract. They don't work for the buyer. They don't work for the seller alone. They work for both. They surely don't work for the agent. That's for sure. They work for the buyer and the seller. They are the administrative conduit between the bag of cash and the title. All right. So make them your friend, whether you choose them or you don't choose them. Same with the lender. Make them your friend, whether you choose them or not choose them. Sometimes you're going to get a partner that does not live up to your standard. You got to work with it. Okay. If it's on the lender side, you can have a conversation with your client and a delicate conversation with your client to maybe double app, right? It's a very sensitive conversation, but that's what we get paid for, right? Is to have these kind of sensitive conversations. And again, we are the producers. Going back to that first statement in the little booklet here, we are the producers of this experience. Okay, we've gone out of our way to create this moment, whether it be representing the buyer or the seller. We are creating the experience, whether we choose the lender. If the lender screws up, that's our problem, right? It affects our experience, our client's experience. And in the end, it affects the opportunity for the future. So you want to be as graceful, as masterful, and as resourceful as possible in those moments.
It sounds as though as it sounds that we work on other people's time, and it's almost as if we need things sometimes promptly or within a timely manner. And so you're saying build a good relationship with these other outside groups
Yeah.
to
So
get us through.
it's the contract timeline. It's not other people's, right? It's not escrow's timeline. It's not the lender's timeline. It's not the inspector's timeline. It's the agreed upon timeline in the contract. And so you want to be proactive about, you don't want to micromanage the lender, but you want to have the kind of relationship with the lender where you can check in and say, hey, is everything going okay? Do you need anything from me, or can I help you with the client? Don't ever let each of them do their jobs, right? Don't be the conduit for information. Oh, the lender told where you're re-explaining something that the lender told you. Don't do that. Or you're re-explaining something that escrow told you. Try not to do that. Okay.
Okay.
Have them, that's what they get paid for. They're making money on the deal. Have them do their job. Especially don't be the one bringing them bad news. Oh, we're not going to, when a lender tells you, we're not going to be able to do this. You say, you call the client right now and you tell them. What you do is you get on the phone to your lender partners and you start exploring other options, so that when you talk to the client, you're coming to them with solutions, right? You want to be the solution for things. You don't want to be the person who creates problems or to bring them problems, if that makes sense. If you could do that in every aspect of your life, you'd be doing okay. Right? Okay, so we're all working in concert. Escrow is communicating with the lender, title is communicating with escrow, and escrow is communicating with title. They're getting preliminary reports. You'll get that with the escrow instructions. The escrow instructions come out in the first 3 to 5 days. They include a preliminary title report in that. What the escrow instructions are a reiteration of the timelines set forth in the RPA and the consecutive counteroffers. That's all it should be, right? And you're sent a preliminary escrow instruction to review it and make sure that that's in alignment. Okay, there's a lot of other stock information in there about what escrow is and what they do and that goes out to the client. But really, you're focused on the terms of the contract are related in that. And also, you look at the preliminary title report to see if there are any big red flags. Not everything comes up in the preliminary title report, right? You might get like a last minute tax lien or mechanics lien that doesn't come up in the preliminary title report, but it's a start of the conversation. Okay. All right. Up to now, everybody get it? Am I good up to now? Am I doing okay up to now? All right. Home warranty, home insurance. The client gets home insurance. And home warranty is determined by the contract, whether you ask for it or not. All right. Let's move on to, the seller's timeline. All right, so seller's timeline is much easier. The seller's there to keep the door open for investigations, keep the door open for appraisals, and to monitor the timelines in the contract. the seller's also there. When I say the seller, I mean the seller and their representative, to solve any problems in the title that might come up or the ownership. There's lots of, and to respond to information that they did not know in the inspection report. So let's start with the, after the, like I stated in the beginning, after the seller accepts the offer, they are contractually bound to the contract. They don't have any outs other than the buyer not performing, right? And we talked about that on the buyer side. Inspections, they keep the door open. They allow you, they have not a fiduciary, a contractual agreement to make the property available at a reasonable, in a reasonable way, right? Some buyers can be unreasonable in their demands for access, and some sellers can be unreasonable in their repulsion to access, right? We have to manage that. Once the seller on the seller side where we are right now, the seller gets a little frustrated. Why, they're spending too much time under the hood. You have to tamp that down because the buyers do have a contractual right to access, to have not free access, reasonable access to the property, to do their investigations, right? Some buyers get carried away. It's something we have to manage. So again, you do get in there, look around, do what you have to do. And then if you're on the if you're on the buyer side, get that done early. So you want to take advantage of making the request for repairs while you're still under the inspection contingency. Okay, so get it started early. The first call I make after I get an accepted offer is to order general inspection, to order, if it has a chimney, I order a chimney inspection. If it has a pool, I order a pool inspection. And the only other one that I order right out of the starting gate is sewer inspection. So if it doesn't have a pool, doesn't have a chimney, I'm ordering sewer and general inspection. Oh, and pest also. I would order all three of those. And that'll give you enough, like day one. If you have a 17-day inspection contingency, you wanna be asking for repairs and or credits on day 10 is the best scenario. Okay, and then the seller, that you have some leverage. You still have the contingency in place. You ask the seller, guys, don't take the, I would suggest, this is my brand, is not to throw everything at the seller. Focus on the issues that have material effect on the value of the property. A poorly wired CGI is not, like, it doesn't change the value of the place, right? If it's a safety issue, then you want it remedied, right? But it doesn't affect the value of a property. In almost every deal I've ever done, there's been an electrical box, a junction box in the crawl space or in the ceiling that did not have a cover on it. Yes, it needs a cover. It's $1.99 the cover, right? Not to say it shouldn't be covered, but it doesn't need to be called out in a request for repair. Okay, we're looking for, and set your buyers up for this. We make an offer based on what we know and what we're told, right? That's in its rarefied form. When we get more information, we take what affects the value of this property. Okay, if it's going to cost me $15,000 to fix the chimney, hey, that's something. If it's going to cost me $40,000 to fix the foundation, that's something, right? All of those are values. And the seller, sellers that I own a house. I don't crawl under my house. I don't know what's going on under there. I don't know what's going on behind the walls. I fix it as it comes, right? There's nothing nefarious in it. The seller discloses anything they know. And if they don't know, then, you're there to find out. And so you find out, and the general inspection will say, hey, the electrical system seems, this panel has been recalled, and there's some wire that is not, they're doubled up on the switches, and there's some cloth wire in there. Okay. So next step, you bring in an electrical contractor. You don't guesstimate what that would cost. All right. You bring in you want to make a substantive ask to the seller. If I'm a seller and I get a request for repair from the buyer side, and it's like, oh yeah, there's tons of things wrong in the inspection report. Here's the inspection report. Give us $50,000, and either in credits or reduction of price. I'm gonna give them a big finger on that, because they didn't do their job. Tell me what the problem specifically is, get a price to remedy it, and put that in front of me. Okay. Oh, you need to replace the panel and some wiring. It's a safety hazard. Great. This is not for upgrades. Okay. If a house isn't bolted, that's not a standard or required, right? That's an upgrade. It's great to have, by the way, but it's an upgrade. So asking for the house to be bolted or compensation for the house to be bolted is not fair as far as I'm concerned. It's not, I wouldn't respond to it. That's an upgrade. I don't respond from the seller's perspective. I don't respond to upgrades. I respond to defects that I did not know about and you were not told about, and I respond to safety issues of substance. That's the mentality I'd like you to take on both sides. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay. Same with appraisal. Hey, appraisals come in on number. Appraisals come in short. Get it done as quickly as possible so that you can negotiate. These are negotiating places, right? Inspection, appraisal, they're all areas to negotiate when there are valid disconnects, a disconnect in value or a disconnect in condition. All right.
And you will only find those out through inspection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the seller has a duty contractually to disclose anything they know.
And of what that they don't know, that's our job to do that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So you start with the general, the sewer line. So you do sewer line, guys. We're in a seismic area. You do sewer line because it's a rigid. It's a rigid object that goes through the ground for tens or hundreds of feet, so it's susceptible to seismic activity, right? Same with a chimney, if there's a chimney. Same with a pool, if there's a pool, right? They're rigid objects, opposed to the rest of the house. It's kind of most of houses, unless it's built out of That's why we don't see brick houses in this area. Most of the houses are stick houses, I mean, they're wood framing or metal framing with plywood and or sheetrock on top, right? So there's a difference. That's actually flexible, right? Takes a little, it absorbs the shock in a different way. So I've done all my investigations. I've reviewed the seller's disclosures. We've negotiated for credits. I've gotten my appraisals in. We've removed all of our contingencies. We are now hard in the deal. Okay, that's saying we are good to go. Only then, after you remove all your contingencies, is your earnest money vulnerable. Not before then. Only then. Does that make sense?
After you remove the contingency, then the earnest money
Yeah, is vulnerable.
is vulnerable.
Yeah, because you're saying I've done all my due diligence. I can get my I got my appraisal. I got my loan. We're ready to go. Right?
Mm-hmm.
You remove all the contingencies, and that is the race for the finish line. That's the final sprint. There's not much more to do in that moment other than to gather paperwork and information, and escrow is setting up signing of loan docs with the lender if there's a lender involved, and or getting all the money into setting up a wire to get all the monies into escrow so that they can collect. So that it's their job to get all of the pieces in one place. The monies, the title, the seller signing their title. They're setting themselves up to move and everything. And so that brings us to several days before close, where the money comes in from the lender. I mean, that the expression is, it is funded, we funded. And then your client, your buyer brings in their money, the seller has signed the title, everything that goes to the title company. The title company is there to ensure that transfer of a clear and clean title. When they get, that happens the day before closing, right? Closing in actuality is that title puts the title over here, records the title with the city, right? They go down and legally record the transfer of ownership with the city. At that time, the money is transferred to the seller, and the title is transferred to the buyer. The buyer now owns the property. Boom. All right. So, I went in a little deeper. I went on a little deeper than this calls for, but I think it's really, really important. So, questions? Any questions for me on that, on the timeline?
No.
Okay.
I wanted to ask you something,
Sure.
Joey.
Sure.
Hi. When you say you don't respond to anything that has nothing to do with safety, right?
No. I do respond to things that have to do with safety and our material and things that are documented by a professional, estimates. Yeah.
But not the upgrade.
Upgrades.
Yeah.
Nah,
But it's, yeah, if it's something superficial, right? You say you don't
yeah.
Mm-hmm. You say you don't respond at all, like you just ignore, let's say the email.
It's a statement of intent, right?
Okay.
It's a statement of intent. The seller can respond to whatever they like. I don't discourage. It's how, if you're asking me, how do I counsel my seller? It's like, oh, they're just like throwing, crap up against a wall, right? To see what sticks. Let's ask them for 50, and they give us whatever we get, we're good with. No, that doesn't work for me. I want to see, they need to do the work on their side. The buyer's agent has to do their work on their side. Get the estimates, get the people out there. Let me know, let me help you by giving me the substantive information that I need to do my job. And that is counsel the seller to an equitable response, right?
Right. And how about if you're on the other side? Let's say you're representing a buyer.
Yeah.
And you're within the 17 days for inspections, right? Where you haven't removed contingencies, let's say, and they get cold feet. So without removing contingencies, can you just cancel?
In the state of California, you can cancel without excuse up to 3 days. It's if you buy a car or a house, it doesn't matter, right? After that, it should be connected to one of the contingencies. So cold feet is not a contingency, right? So you don't want to say that, but you can say this house, they just realized that this house is too big of a project for them, or too big of a financial lift for them, right? Things have changed in their finances. So you want to give them a
valid point.
Yeah.
I see. Okay, got it.
Does that
Thank you.
help? Yeah.
Yes, a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, and that happens. And when when a client gets cold feet, if the timelines allow, give them a night to sleep on it also. Hey, absolutely understand. I support you in your decision. I've done this several times. So what I'd like to do is just sleep on your decision. We'll connect in the morning. If you still feel that way, let's go. I will execute on your wishes, right?
Right.
So that's a little bit where some of the mastery comes into. Okay. Any other questions? All right. Best practices for managing the deal. So when you're looking at your client, try to be as objective as possible. Look at the areas that are at risk. Where can a deal fall apart, right? Where is the deal at risk of falling apart? Are they a good borrower? Are they motivated properly? Is the timing correct? So we want to add, I think we talked about a bunch of this stuff. From what I've told, what are some of the best practices to keep a deal alive?
Constant communication.
Absolutely.
Getting onto those inspections as soon as possible once a deal is accepted.
Keeping things time. Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I think both of those things. You want to make sure you have all your ducks in a row. Your part of our job is a psychological journey with the clients, right? So I have kids, right? Kids, I think I have a great relationship with my daughters, and they're two very, very strong young women who are able to say no and to make solid choices. I trust their choices, right? Whether I would choose it or not, I trust their choices. And it's because that I give 99% of the credit to the fact that they know that they can always, that they have a support system, they have a safe space that they can come back to anytime, and that I'm consistent with them in my in how I process information and the information that I give. I try not to give them like, I try to be as subjective or objective as possible in my advice, without it being slanted to my needs, right? I think it's the same with your clients too.
Because they know, they can tell. Yeah.
Yeah, it keeps the they feel confident that you have their back,
Yes.
and that they have that you know what you're talking about, right? And so I really feel that that's a repetitive theme in these relationships. People are very vulnerable when buying a property. It's one of the largest purchases of their life. Give them a safe space. There's plenty of agents who set their hair on fire and get emotional. I think that trickles down to their clients, even if their client is not that.
Can that be a common thing for new agents? I mean, it's yeah.
Yeah, it is a problem for new agents. Don't be the new agents who covers up their insecurities of the information with bravado, right? You don't need to puff up. You don't need to get anger involved, because you don't. This is what some people go to, right? You have a support system. You don't need to know everything. It's impossible even for me to know everything. But I have my trusted sources for support. Let me get back to you. I believe I have a solution to that. Let me get back to you. I just want to check one thing, okay? It's okay to delay response. It's okay to say, I want to check with my partner, right? Your mentor is your partner in this deal. So saying, I'm going to check with my partner is much more powerful than trying to bully your way through it, which I see happen all the time. All right. That goes with, the last question: how can you help manage other parties involved in the deal? Keep your head. They need to know that you are masterful also, right? That you have a support system, even if you don't have all the information. Okay. All right, the co-broker relationship, we talked about that a lot. All right, yep. While your clients, guys, you spent all this time trying to acquire the client, and then you spend all this energy selling their property, finding them a property, getting them into contract, getting the contract closed. You don't want to run away from them after you got them what they wanted. They hired you because they believe you can get them what they wanted, right? You had to convince them of that at some point or another through your relational activities. Do not run away from them. Take advantage, leverage that joy that comes along with homeownership. All right. With your Keller Williams app, one thing is you can create a vendor list in that and share that with your clients and have them going back to that vendor list through your Keller Williams app. Plan a closing gift. Closing gifts can be so many things. One that I like is throw them a party, right? If I'm
A housewarming party?
Sure, invite all your friends. I'm going to bring some food and some champagne and whatever else you want. Tell me how many people it's going to be, and you show up there with the food and the booze, and if you're making $25,000 off a $1 million sale, spending $500 to throw a party for a client, being there, being part of the joy of that moment is invaluable. Invaluable, right?
And you can meet possible future clients.
Duh. That's exactly what you could do. Yeah. So Renee, that's a great point, Renee, and it's exactly the point I was trying to make. Okay, let's see here. Boom. Was that the right way? Oh, command. Yeah. Command is also a great tool. In opportunities in command, you can create a checklist that that correspond with every phase of the deal, whether it's working with buyer, working with seller, pre-purchase, pre-sale. You create, this helps you create a standard by creating a checklist in all of the different stages of the deal. All right, it's a great great tool to have. Consumer guide settings allow you to share those benchmarks with your clients. So again, giving them the opportunity to know where they are in the process. All right, that brings us sort of to the end of the conversation. Ahas, what have you learned in this conversation?
Timing is important. Communication is key in this whole entire thing from beginning to end, and creating good, long-lasting relationships.
I could, yeah. I mean,
That's what I got.
yeah. We're in the relationship business with your client, with your I'll just stop the share here. I'm sorry. Oh, right here, stop share. Maybe. Did I screw that up? Yeah, of course I did. Cool. There you go. With your client, with the cooperating brokers, with the vendors, all of them, you want to develop a good relationship. It's imperative to the outcome of your of this process, and it's going to alleviate tons of stress for you and your client, right?
Makes sense.
Yeah. Anyone else? Anybody else? Any ahas? Right. Anybody any other ahas from any of the series or questions that I can help anybody with before I sign off?
Joey, you said that you're going to be doing another, I missed that one, the 135 one.
135.
Yeah. That's at 2 o'clock.
It's at 2 o'clock. Yeah, I'm going over to my west side, Westwood right now, and I'm going to do it from there. That's on
Zoom as well. Okay.
Zoom also. Yeah.
Okay, then I'll see you then.
All right, I will be there.
Okay.
All right, guys, have a great day. I'll see you if you're coming to the 135. I'll see you in a little bit.
Thank you, Joey.